When you hear the name Meghalaya, your mind likely jumps to rivers, forests, and the land of clouds. This is the pristine green India that gets plastered across tourism websites and postcards. It's a deeply traditional state, home to indigenous groups like the Khasi and Garo tribes, who have lived in a matriarchal society intimately tied to this natural environment for centuries. So when the annual lists of India's most polluted places are published, you expect the top spot to go to massive, gridlocked urban sprawls, places like Delhi, Noida, or Ghaziabad. In 2024, the absolute most polluted city in the entire country was Bernihat, a small town tucked into the Meghalayan hills. This chart shows exactly how extreme the air quality has become. The World Health Organization recommends a maximum PM 2.5 particle limit of 5. Bernihat's average sits at an incredible 128. How does a small tribal village, tucked inside one of India's greenest and most pristine states, end up choking on more toxic air than the country's largest urban nightmares? Bernihat is technically located in Meghalaya, but it exists as an extension of Guwahati, the major city in neighboring Assam. Because it is only 20 kilometers away, Guwahati's heavy industrial development has physically crossed the state border. Today, roughly 80 highly polluting factories are crammed into this one tiny border town. To make matters worse, Bernihat sits in a bowl-shaped valley. The topography acts as a physical trap. The massive volume of industrial emissions generated here has nowhere to escape, so it settles directly over the town. Because the pollution crosses state lines, accountability vanishes. It falls into a jurisdictional blind spot between the governments of Assam and Meghalaya, leaving these factories to operate largely unchecked. Down on the ground, the natural sounds of the forest have been completely drowned out by a relentless 24/7 industrial hum, and the sky is permanently choked with smoke. Between the bowl-shaped mountains and the lack of political oversight, Bernihat has become a location that absorbs the environmental cost of another city's progress. That footprint coats every single leaf, stone, and house in the village with a thick, inescapable layer of black soot. People living here are forced to wash the vegetables they grow in their own gardens up to 4 times, scrubbing off the industrial grime just so they can eat dinner safely. This line graph traces the human toll of that soot. The government's own data shows that respiratory cases in the area spiked from 2,082 in 2022 to 3,681 by 2024. That is a 77% jump in just 2 years. What was once a healthy indigenous community is now experiencing a surge in severe asthma attacks and fatal throat cancers, with locals actively burying their own family members due to the air they breathe. And the air is only half the problem. Locals report that factories routinely bypass environmental regulations by running underground pipes to dump toxic chemical waste directly into the local river. The owners of these facilities take their massive profit margins back across the border, while the Khasi and Garo families are left to inherit the lethal consequences. The massive industrial operation fueling this local collapse is an ethanol plant. This production is driven by a national initiative. The government mandates blending 20, but producing that eco-friendly fuel requires highly toxic, largely unregulated manufacturing processes that are currently devastating Bernihat's landscape. As this diagram illustrates, the policy hasn't actually erased the tailpipe emissions of city commuters. It has offshored them. The environmental burden is siphoned out of the metropolis and dumped straight into the lungs of rural villagers. We cannot call a policy a green transition if it requires sacrificing human lives and destroying an indigenous ecosystem to achieve it. True sustainable development has to sustain the people living next door, not just balance a national emissions spreadsheet.